Oh, and there's Jamal, I think.
This is me. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Jamal.
I'm changing positions right now. Give me a sec, turn my camera on. A couple minutes here.
I think I saw Lori come on.
Okay, so we are live on YouTube, and I just need a moment to share it to our website and we'll be good to go. So give me just a second.
Hi, Libby.
So Alberta, you might want to take yourself off of mute because we're about to start.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, that's awesome. I would like to convene the Indiana Arts Commission quarterly business meeting. Today is Friday, September the 11th, 2020, and the time is 9:02 a.m. This meeting is being held electronically. My name is Alberta Barker, and I am Vice Chair from Lafayette, filling in for our Chair, Alan Platt, who gives his regards. He is unable to be with us this morning. We'd like to start with introductions, beginning with the IAC staff.
Maya Michelson, IAC staff.
Kate Sharp, IAC.
Bridget Eckert, IAC staff.
Deanna Polsma, IAC staff.
Stephanie Haynes, IAC staff.
Jasmine Behar, IAC staff.
Anna Chagaster, IAC staff.
Stephanie Fendler, IAC staff.
And Louis Rickey, Executive Director. Did we get all the staff? I think so, Alberta.
Okay, and if we could go around with the commissioners. Stephanie, do you want to do a roll call for the commissioners?
Yes, thank you, Alberta. Kathy Anderson.
Here.
Alberta Barker.
Here.
Libby Chu.
Here.
Ruth Ann Cowling.
Here.
Dave Heist.
Here.
Greg Hull.
Here.
Walter Kanabi. Lori McRobbie.
Here.
Jake Oakman.
Here.
Sherry Stark. Dusty Stemmer.
Sorry, Sherry's here.
Oh, thank you, Sherry.
Thank you.
Nancy Stewart.
Delighted to be here.
Ann Valentine.
Here.
Thank you, Stephanie. We will begin with the approval of the agenda and the June 12th meeting minutes. I think all of us have had an opportunity to review those. If there are any corrections, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda and the minutes as presented.
Dave Heist, so moved.
Second, Lori McRobbie.
Awesome. Stephanie, if you could do a roll call for approval.
Yes. Kathy Anderson.
Approve.
Alberta Barker.
Approve.
Libby Chu.
Approve.
Ruth Ann Cowling.
Approved.
Dave Heist.
Approved.
Greg Hull.
Approved.
Walter Kanabi. Lori McRobbie.
Approve.
Jake Oakman.
Approve.
Sherry Stark.
Approve.
Dusty Stemmer. She here? No. Nancy Stewart.
Approved.
Ann Valentine.
Approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is our special planning session. And Louis, I will turn it over to you to introduce our guests.
Thank you, Alberta. And we're going to actually start it off with reviewing the cultural equity statement that our study group crafted. And then I will introduce Karen Gall-Mills, who's our planning consultant from Chicago and Bloomington. She's director of the Arts Administration program in Bloomington, but a Chicago resident, at least sometimes in her life. And Jamal Smith. And Jamal, of course, we know very well here at the commission. He's with IU Health, planning professional, but he's also been involved with us because of his lovely wife was a commissioner for many years with us. So, and we're glad to welcome Jamal as well. But let's begin with our cultural equity statement that a study group that we had that had representation from a variety of cultures and perspectives on it. And we had a couple of commissioners serve on that. Dusty, who's not with us today, but Jamal, you also served on this, so you could also chime in a little bit about the crafting of this statement if you'd like. But I will pause for a moment here so people can read it. We should bring it up on the screen, Chapin, if we can. It's the next slide, and then we can entertain. Well, I think if you go back, Chapin.
It's not on there. I'm bringing it up.
Oh, thank you. So let's pause for a moment so people can review it and refresh their memories about it. And if you recall, this is kind of a first step of expanding our values as a commission and to place cultural equity on the same plane that we've had as of geographic equity around the state. I don't know if we have anybody else on the who was on the study group besides Jamal with us today. Jamal, you want to comment on the crafting of this a little bit?
Yeah, so thanks, Louis. I appreciate it. And good morning, everybody. Interestingly enough, it was a great exercise of just kind of funneling in and honing in on the statement you see today. I think the group was very intentional about its wording, about how inclusive the phrasing would be. There was some really good discussion about making sure that the framing of the passage was inclusive of not just the diversity, cultural diversity of our country and the state, but just the diversity within Indiana. There were some, I think the folks who were crafting it were very much aware that Indiana is a really interesting and unique state in that you don't have to travel very far before the cultural dynamic and the communities begin to shift a little bit. And so, how do we craft something that speaks to, a lot of the unrest that's going on right now and quite frankly has been going on for centuries? How do we speak to the equity needed, the diversity, as I mentioned before, and just the need for us to ensure that the Arts Commission and arts in general has an opportunity to make it into places and spaces that have traditionally been kind of left out. I'll be speaking a little bit more about the listening sessions and our attempts to engage communities throughout the state. But I think the statement kind of leads into driving that mission of being able to tap into those places that the commission and arts in general have not necessarily engaged in. So yeah, I'll just close it up with that. I just thought it was a really great exercise. It was actually, for someone who's been living and breathing this space for quite some time, it was helpful for me as well.
Paige, do you want to make any comments about this? Because you and I worked together with this group.
Just how passionate everybody was about putting this together, both the staff and the folks that represent different large community groups, like representing artists and individuals of color. So, and that it's a strong value statement that we can create action around. So that's about, it was a really great process, and I was honored to be a part of it.
So Alberta, we can open it up for comments or questions from the commissioners before we talk about adopting it. So.
Sure. I think that this equity statement is very well done, and certainly appreciate all of the hard work and effort that everyone put into it. So I will go ahead and open it up to the commissioners for any feedback.
This is Lori McRobbie. I think, like a lot of us have been involved in, trying to craft statements that express the values that are very much part of this. I think this is really excellent. In fact, it's influenced me in the kinds of suggestions that I've made in other organizations. The one piece that I'm wondering whether the group considered is including as a second step a statement or a series of statements about how and in what way this will change what we do. In other words, the specific actions we might take that would change or reinforce, I think we could probably say it's more likely to be that, reinforce the programs that the commission has underway. And, that's a process, to be sure. I'm curious to know whether the group considered that, and whether, or that perhaps is now the next step.
I would say, Lori, that the group could consider that and decided that it was the next step, that the first level is to create the policy to build the actions off of. And the group did consider putting action verbiage type of wording in it, and then sort of decided that, once you start going down that path, you have to be prepared to do what you say you're going to do,
Right.
and that takes time to be able to deliver on things that you say you're going to do. And secondly, it would only be piecemeal at a very early stage. So it was sort of decided that it would be the policy that would be the foundation for the action statements to follow, and that those action statements would be things that the commission could actually do and accomplish, that would be built upon this statement. So yeah, there was a good amount of discussion about that kind of early on in the deliberation. Again, Jamal, you want to comment on that, maybe?
Sure. In fact, excuse me, at one point, I mean, obviously the statement you guys are looking at now is the baked version that's a lot shorter than the original statement that was, I don't know, probably a couple of pages long. I mean, there was a lot of input, some of which was action items, which we had some very healthy discussion about the need, and this is a personal piece of importance for me, is because I've been a part of a number of these where you have some really, really good discussion and then nothing happens, right? And which I think is where you're going, Lord. But as Lewis pointed out, one, in light of the action items, particularly probably being baked into what is in essence a strategic plan, and with Lewis, unfortunately, sailing off into the sunset here in the near future, the idea is to have whoever the new director is be able to take this well-written policy or this well-written statement and use it as a framework for which to create the strategic plan, which is where the action items will come from. And I would hate to do that without that person, he or she, having the opportunity to have input into how those actions take part and take place. And so we kind of settled here with the understanding that this would be, in essence, the guiding principle, if you will, that led to the action items, with the need to continuously emphasize the need for action. And that's not just isolated to the Arts Commission. I think anyone who is taking this kind of work and this type of a statement seriously understands the need to extend itself from rhetoric and move into some actual action items. So I don't know if that framed it appropriately, Louis.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jamal.
Louis, do you want to add about the Cultural Advisory Council that we look to construct and to help guide us to move forward?
Yeah, so obviously Jamal was part of, I don't want to call it a temporary body, but a body that was assembled for the express purpose of crafting this statement. And, we are going to be proposing to the commission and are proposing to the commission that create a more body that represents the cultural diversity of our state and position a kind of the representation of it in the commission work as we do with our regional arts partner system. Again, if you look at this concept here, we're saying that we've had sort of an intentionality about geographic equity in our state for many, many years. And the regional arts partner system is the embodiment of that intentional strategy. I mean, we've built up upon that and done other things, but that is the embodiment. And we actually bring that voice to the commission table. Larry will give his report later on today as chair of that group. And what we want to do is to do a same sort of intentional structure for this effort to bring, again, the cultural equity imperative on the same level as the geographic imperative, and with the same kind of intentionality and long-term commitment that we've exhibited with our geographic focus that we would now exhibit and build on for the cultural equity piece of it. So, we're proposing that we would have a body, obviously, a body of people to help advise us and to bring that voice to the table on a consistent and regular basis as we do the regional arts partners as they represent the geographic richness of our state. This body would represent the cultural richness of our state. So, so that is coming back to Lori's comment. That's probably the first action item that we will want to scaffold off of this statement.
Is there any other feedback before we vote to adopt the cultural equity statement?
Alberta, Dave Heist, just real quickly, I just want to build on Lori's comment that I think the statement is obviously very well done, and I appreciate the background that Jamal and others have explained on the process. But I think those action steps are the things that I'd really like to see us embrace with some specificity just as soon as we can. So those are the only thoughts I would have. I'm very supportive of the statement.
Thank you, Dave. Anything else?
Jamal, just remember that you had a comment to my question just about the words there and they in the statement. Everything else is just so much about oneness. I mean, I understand what you're doing. It's a beautiful statement, but that one sentence makes it more about they and us instead of, the diverse oneness of Indiana. Sorry to spring this on you, but I just felt I needed to say that. So.
Which sentence, Kathy? I'm sorry. Culture history of the people who call Indiana home, we value, embrace their artistic expression. Is that where you?
Yeah.
And
I don't know, somehow just I don't mean to wordsmith, but it just is the feeling that it's they and us rather than, you know, all of the diverse communities together. Just a thought.
Good thought, good question. And I'm pulling this out of the air actually, but I'm assuming the sentiment here is the they, and I get the them against us kind of a thing. Like this, I guess, going for is separation, and maybe it is. I think somebody put in the chat, we and our. I think that's something to consider, but I don't have a direct. I'm mumbling. I'm assuming the spirit here was something along the lines of I don't know, embracing the they as individuals or groups of folks who haven't been a part of us, which I don't know, maybe that defends what you're trying to get to anyway, which is making them a part of us. Open that up for discussion. We didn't drill down. I don't think there was any discussion about the they and the we and the
I don't want to
Our intent was to make sure that we called out the fact that historically, and again, I say this is not just the Arts Commission, but as most entities, many entities tend to exclude parts and pieces of communities throughout, not just this state, but others as well. And how do we craft a statement that acknowledges that? One, two, points out the importance of embracing those communities and those people moving forward. So I don't know, open it up for discussion.
I think as simple as we and our is just better than they and their and they. I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but just,
So the only thing that sorry.
I was just going to say, now that I'm digesting this, Kathy, as you thrown this out here, right? So the sense is just to read it out, right? Like being consistently mindful and inclusive of the needs, ideas, and cultural history of the people who call Indiana home. To say we value our would almost be duplicative of what we've always done, because we've always valued our points of view, right? But we have rarely valued the they who we are trying to embrace. Now I'm playing devil's advocate here, obviously, but so I think calling it out to say that I think it's a given, at least it would be assumed, that we have always valued our artistic expression. It could be, that could be defined or described by where we spent our money, our time, and our resources. But we historically have not valued their artistic expression, and we haven't supported them in their advancement. And maybe there is a need to specify that moving forward. Now, again,
Have you had a chance to read Lori's suggestion in the chat, which maybe captures what we're talking about?
I mean,
I haven't read it. Check it out.
Yeah, I think I understand, Jamal, what you're saying. I think there's that the use of those pronouns was intentional. It does, it does, in a sense, identify the point I think you're making. But at the same time, I think, and I crafted something that, as I say, I'm not sure that I think it's the greatest sentence in the world. But it is a way to reinforce the spirit of all of us are taking care of the arts for everyone in Indiana, and all of us includes every community, every tradition, every artistic tradition. I mean, to the extent that we have some gaps to make up for, perhaps those are things that we specify more clearly in the actions. And maybe that's where we sort of drill into this idea that you're expressing, Jamal. That's one way to handle this. But I toss that out. I tend to think better if I can just write it all down. And so for what it's worth, I offer it up, and it can be ripped apart and rejected by the group, however you'd like.
I was just going to weigh in and just say, with what Jamal is saying, I think we have to be sensitive to the fact that there are people who have been on the outside of what we've done as an organization, and you know, saying they, I understand, makes a distinction of peoples in some way, but sometimes it's necessary to identify the they in order to make the we out of it. And I mean, I think it's very akin to, you know, the rhetoric around and the arguments around, you know, the phrase Black Lives Matter, or then people want to say all lives matter.
Yep.
Well, yeah, all lives matter, but the point is that we have not valued Black lives. So this is kind of the same thing. It's not that we're not all in this together, but this pointedly says we're all in this together. Yes, traditionally we haven't been all in this together, and we're looking at groups that we have not represented or served adequately, and we are going to serve them. And there is a them there, and it's not a we, it's a them. It's a very pointed way of looking at the work that is to be done. That would be my 2 cents.
I was actually going to use that example as I was thinking of this, so you beat me to it.
I really appreciate the conversation, and I get it, and I think it's good to put it out there. So thank you for the discussion.
And thank you, Kathy, for bringing that up. I think it was an excellent discussion as well. If Jamal, did you have any other comments?
No, ma'am. I was echoing your appreciation for Kathy and Lewis.
Okay. That being said, I will take a motion to adopt the proposed cultural equity statement, and you know, perhaps when we get this cultural equity panel going, that may be one of the things that they want to do is possibly take a look and revise it. So if there's not any further discussion, I will go ahead and take a motion to adopt it.
I so move, Kathy Anderson.
Second,
Rathan.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to adopt the cultural equity statement as proposed. Stephanie, could you do a roll call, please?
Yes,
for
Alberta,
approval?
thank you. Kathy Anderson,
Yes.
Alberta Barker,
Yes.
Libby Chu, Ruth Ann Cowling,
Yes.
Dave Heiss.
Yes, for Libby, sorry.
Oh, thanks, Libby.
Dave Heiss supports.
Thank you, Dave. Greg Hall,
Thank you. Yes.
Lori McRobbie,
Yes.
Jake Oakman,
Yes.
Sherry Stark,
Yes.
Nancy Stewart,
Yes.
Ann Valentine,
Yes.
and any other commissioners that have logged on that I'm missing. Okay. Motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. And at this time, Lewis, I'll turn it back over to you.
So I'm welcoming Karen Gall-Mills, who's going to talk a little bit about kind of our next step in planning and what we're going to do over the next several months. Karen.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for letting me listen in on a rich discussion. As Lewis said, I come from Indiana University's Arts Administration program, but also from working in public bodies that give out public money for the arts. So I am both empathetic and sympathetic to the work ahead for this body. And over the course of the spring and the summer, Lewis and Chad and I, and then we added in your chair, I believe that's Alan, in the last couple of weeks, have talked a little bit about the upcoming transition, the things that the commission is working on, particularly something as important as this cultural equity statement, and the things that you're beginning to recognize or say out loud about the work of the commission going forward. And to put that in the context of the upcoming leadership transition, knowing too that you have a strategic plan that's sort of coming to an end. And before the world of COVID, we started to brainstorm with, well, how can we, using Lewis's word, build some scaffolding around the key decisions that are going to need to be made over the course of the next 12 to 18 to 24 months as we transition leaders, as we think about what the future of the agency holds, as we think about the change that will be required of us now that we have adopted this really important cultural equity statement. Then when you put that in the uncertainty of a COVID world, the thinking about doing a very traditional strategic planning process quickly sort of dissipated. And we began to say, you know, what we need is to have some real conversation as a commission, as a body, knowing you only get together a handful of times a year, knowing that you get together in a public forum, which is just a slightly different kind of board work than maybe we're used to on our nonprofit boards. And knowing there are going to be some really tough questions in front of you, particularly now, as we think about the future of artists and the arts organizations in someday the post-COVID world. If you saw Dr. Fauci's comments in the last day or so about the desire to return to the theater without a mask on, probably being a year away from when a vaccine is adopted, we know we have to take the long view to really do what the Arts Commission says it's going to do about supporting the arts and artists for everyone, everywhere in Indiana. And there are going to be some tough questions that come in front of this body, questions that other people who've had your roles have not had to face, about what the commission should actually do as it's also trying to change and adapt and think about equity in a different way. So all of that to say, we quickly came to, maybe it's not a traditional strategic planning process in air quotes, but rather maybe as a commission, we need to have a series of conversations that get at some of these questions of values and that bind the commission together so that you are ready to make these tough decisions as the next year, 2 years rolls forward. And I'm so privileged to have listened to your discussion just now about the language of the equity statement, because this says to me that you are primed and ready to have these deep discussions and you have the muscles built to begin to do that work. So I think that that bodes well for how we will roll this forward. As Chad and Lewis and I talked more this summer, we kind of came down to 3 questions, and you see that there's 4 questions here on the slide, but here's how they fit together. Anybody who is, I think all of us, at least in the last 6 months, have had to retool a lot about what we do and how we do it. And I think that retooling works best when it is grounded very, very firmly in this question of purpose. Why are we here? And yes, there's authorizing legislation that says what the Arts Commission is meant to do, and everyone respects and understands that. But I think there is merit as we think about how will you make tough decisions moving forward. There is merit in revisiting the questions of why are we here? How do we live our values? And what change will that require if we are going to live our values as we move forward? And then what does all of that mean for our future? If as a commission, you can have those conversations over the course of the time between now and the end of this calendar year, and really feel that you can create a clear framework for decision-making, grounded in those values, grounded in your equity statement, grounded in a clear understanding of purpose. That framework, a strategic framework, not a plan, that framework will help you choose the right next leader. That framework will help you deal with the many challenging decisions you have to make. Do we save large organizations or do we save all organizations? Do we save artists or do we save institutions? All of that will come in front of you, especially as we walk into a budget year in the legislature where everyone needs the same thing, which is more money at a time there is less money. Having that framework will hopefully allow you to really make progress and feel that you are working as a whole and as one, even as you work through the leadership transition. So that's what Lewis has asked me, and Chad and Alan have asked me to try to help you all do. I have to teach a class at 10 o'clock this morning, so we are not going to get into the depths of that right now, but watch your emails for some invitations to some work sessions. Just 3 of them in October and November, and then we'll do this, we'll have some more in the December meeting, where we can really interrogate these questions together. These are public sessions, certainly, but it will be a chance for you to work with one another, to walk through some sort of guided frameworks and understand and get some real clarity for yourselves about these questions, and then build out a framework that you can approve that will allow you to use that for your decision-making as you move ahead. The work can't simply be you alone. This work that you and I will do together will just be us. There needs to be more community listening work, certainly, that happens as part of that. And I know that's what Jamal is going to talk about next. All I wanted to do here was frame up, what are we doing? Not so much a strategic plan as a framework for decision-making. How are we going to do it? Through a series of working sessions with as many of us as can be in the conversation. And what do we hope to end up with? A framework that really guides our decisions as we move forward and face the challenges ahead. Louis, why don't I stop there and see if there's anything more you want to add to that conversation, or see if there are any questions that I can answer.
Thank you, Karen. What are your thoughts as a commission about this?
I think this is a great opportunity to do all the things you've described, because we are going to be facing some really, really difficult decisions in the next few months, in the next year. So I'm really glad that we're planning and doing this. I think this is a good activity. It's going to be hard.
I would agree. I appreciate having a structure to help us move forward in a thoughtful way.
I'm just jealous you ought to include former commissioners.
Well, we can definitely consider that. I mean,
Not a terrible idea.
The more continuity really with all of this, actually, the better. So, so there's no reason, Nancy, that we couldn't, invite you and Sherry and Kathy into that discussion as the commissioners who are going off, because it obviously bridges a lot of things, and we need bridge people in all of that to help us with that continuity. So as we all know, you can't go from anywhere except from the place you are at. So to be a Hoosier and put that word at the end of the sentence, but that's the only place you can go from. So I do like the idea of that continuity, and perhaps beyond the 3 of you, there may be a couple of other former commissioners that have continued to serve on our committees and whatnot that might be worth inviting into the conversation as well, actually, because that's part of our continuity. So
maybe prior to the meetings, the agenda for what the meeting is going to be discussing, so we could give some pre-thought to expedite the meeting when it actually happens, would be helpful.
May I say, piggyback on Ruth Ann's, which is that I'd like to know, before what Ruth Ann is saying at the meeting agenda. It's probably too early, but I'd like you to keep us informed about the process to get to the process of planning for the public hearing. I mean, not now, but eventually, or before, or whatever. That's all. I mean, I'm not asking for answers now. I just want to say that that's what I'd like to see. I mean, how do you gather information to know what to ask? That's all.
And I think some of that is going to come from Jamal here in just a minute.
Great. Thank you. Jamal, I'll be looking at you.
Well, we should probably let Karen go to her class. And I will see if Jamal can join us and talk a little bit about the virtual listening tour that we have proposed. So Jamal.
Absolutely. Thanks, Karen, before you leave. Appreciate you framing that. and good luck. We'll touch base soon. So excited about the listening tour for a few reasons. One, it's kind of a sweet spot of mine, right? Engaging communities that have been traditionally disconnected, and having discussions that they haven't traditionally had the opportunity to have. There's tons of resources that states and local communities provide, in particular with the arts. And it's the old adage, right? If you don't know, you don't know. So we're excited about being able to engage in that piece. In doing so, we're framing it in a way, right? So we've had a couple of kind of pre-read discussions about the format and the model we'll take and the best way to get the results that we want. Discussions around what types of, well, let me back up. And I know Karen mentioned some about, because the original discussion when Louis and I began kind of thinking through this thing was pre-COVID. So the original goal was to actually be present in the actual communities as we traditionally would, right? Touch, hug, feel, shake hands, be there, not virtually. But of course, since COVID, we've had to rethink that approach and how best to make that happen. And I think there's some pros and cons that come with the virtual space. I don't think we have, virtually is a way to go. The one thing you lose is that personal touch. I'm hoping I can fill that gap just through relationship and, being able to bring folks together through that, through that connection. But two, I think on the flip side, virtual allows us to tap into probably more spaces. So do a better job of, I'm going to use the word control, because it's not the best one right now, but allow us to do a better job of managing and facilitating the discussion. I'll put it that way. There's a magical mute button that allows some things to happen when some of those meetings get a little carried away, and allows us to get more discussion and more productivity out of it. So we're excited. And then, so we've had some discussions about who should be engaged in those meetings. Should it be, the idea that it probably wouldn't be as helpful as we would want it to be if everybody in discussion was directly tied to the arts. Directors of arts organizations, arts commissions, museums, because, even if of color, they would have probably been aware. Our goal is to tap into folks who probably haven't been and should be aware. Folks in education, folks in healthcare, just community leaders and stakeholders who are fighting the fight for the people who live, work, and play in their communities, continuously looking for resources to help the people who they serve every day. Those types of individuals who you could argue may have never heard of the Arts Commission. How do we engage them and get into that discussion? One end of the spectrum. The other end was, do we have the Arts Commission in the room when we have the discussions, to make sure that we have the kind of sincerity that we're looking for, right? The uncut version of input that we want from the individuals we bring to the meeting. So those prep meetings have been extremely valuable, to what we're trying to accomplish with these listening sessions. We've broken the state into thirds. We've had kind of the northern region, if you will, or the central region and the southern region. And we've kind of come to the conclusion that we can't hit everything on the first swath. And so hopefully there's a phase two. We've talked about this, the need to continuously have these discussions. But for now, we're going to target that northern region, kind of combination between, Gary and the South Bend, Mishawaka area, and hone in on some key folks in those spaces here in the central Indiana region. And then the southern part of the state, we're going to, on this initial phase, we're going to target Evansville, who often feels similar to Gary in the northern part that they are always left out of state discussions. And so I'm excited about, about that. One of the ways we're going to make sure we're capturing the community sentiment is we're going to send out some pre-surveys after we identify the folks who will participate. Send out some pre-surveys, which ask some pointed questions, some things we want to get to you know, and not just specific to the Arts Commission. In fact, we don't want to drive the discussion, you know, and wrap it around the Arts Commission. We want to, you know, be able to discuss things, you know, well, in the survey, the pre-survey, we want to pull out, you know, information or questions from the people. We want to know, you know, what kind of activities do they enjoy and what do they find meaningful? You know, what are their core personal values? Where are places that they, you know, what are places in their community that offer arts and cultural experiences that are important to them? In essence, what kind of spaces do they engage with artists, you know, and or creatives in their community? We want to have some discussions about how arts are integrated and or accessible to their everyday life. You know, getting a feel for who or what the, you know, what organizations are key pillars in their community, so that we can begin to identify why they associate with those organizations as key pillars. And then pull out some things personally with them, like how do they, you know, represent and support their community? And what does their community invest, or how does their community invest in the creative growth of young people in the community? And then, of course, you know, we want to make sure that we have some input around, you know, COVID-19 and, you know, how pre and post or pre and current COVID has the arts played a role in the community or in their personal lives as well. So, you know, with that, we'll begin to frame some questions, or that'll guide some of the discussion as we engage, so that we know. I'm losing you guys. I keep getting you have bad connection, so somebody give me a thumbs down if I start to break up or something. But our goal is to use that to frame the discussion and the questions and go in. We want it to be more of a dialogue. We are going to make sure we remove things like recording the meeting. We've kind of erred on the side of not having Big Brother, in this case, the Arts Commission, in the space, so that we don't mute or dilute the discussion. We want it to be as genuine, as raw and uncut as it possibly can be. We want to hear from the community about literally what's happening. What's the pulse of what's going on? You know, how are they dealing with the social unrest and inequities that are going on? And then be able to frame it around the idea of how arts or engaging creatives in their space could help ease, help remedy, help solve, help cure, help move some things along in their community. But we want to hear it through their lens. We don't want to give them what to say. We don't want to tell them what to say. We don't want to force them to say anything or make them, or, you know, feel uncomfortable about, you know, speaking from the heart. So those are some of the primary goals of it. You know, we've got a list of folks from community center leaders, some faith-based leaders in the community. We've got some healthcare and social working providers in the communities that are going to be involved in the discussion. We do have a couple arts professionals, not directly, maybe indirectly involved in the arts. We've got some sports professionals. We've got some educators and teachers. We have some folks who have retired and, you know, more community volunteers. We have some folks from actually the individuals who are retired were former law enforcement, you know, personnel. So we've got a really good swath of representatives from those communities, and again, we look forward to hearing what they have to say about, you know, what they see and what's happening in their respective communities. So with that, let me pause for a minute, give some opportunity for some feedback from you guys as a committee. We'd love to hear it.
Jamal, Dave Heiss. I just mentioned, I appreciate you walking us through this, and I love the idea of doing these sessions. And to some of the points that you talked about of just being sure that people can speak from their heart. Just give you one example, that at Parkview Health in Fort Wayne, we've been doing similar listening sessions just with internal folks, with Parkview employees over the last couple of months. And we very intentionally separated leaders from coworkers, so that we had leader sessions, we had coworker sessions, because we thought it would help people to speak from the heart. So I don't know that that's a similar analogy to what you have here, but but I'm glad to hear you're thinking of those things.
Yep. Appreciate that, Dave. Yeah, that was the. I mean, that's the spirit that we're going for. We just want to be able to create an atmosphere where folks feel free to speak. Now, Canada, we're going to have some people who really don't care whether you're in the room or not. They're going to speak their mind. So it's not necessarily for them. It's the folks who are really conscious about their surroundings, for a lot of reasons. And we want to make sure that we create a space and a place that allows them to be able to convey that true feeling. Because honestly, if we don't get that honest feedback, then this is a waste of time.
Well, I have a concern that because you've targeted certain cities, Fort Wayne, Evansville, and probably Indianapolis, shouldn't we be concerned about input from other areas of the state too, instead of just, some participants on your panel? I like the range of people that you're including. I think that's great. But is there any way to include some people from some other areas that might give different perspectives than?
Yes, ma'am. Great thought. That was actually one of we talked through that at length for a minute. It was like, hey, we're going to be missing out, and uniquely because Indiana, if you go to these different states, you start naming the different cities and the states or different towns, the culture changes, right? The communities look and feel different. So you're missing some of that. You're absolutely correct, and that's a really good statement. Where we landed, because trust me, that was a really healthy discussion and back and forth. Is one, it's tough to capture everybody all at once, especially considering the barriers. And so, the listening sessions can't be hours on hours on end, right? There's a stop. And because the communities are so vastly different in many cases, we didn't want one to feel like they didn't get enough of input versus another. So those are all the dynamics, which is why we landed at this can't stop at just this first run at it. We've got to revisit. We've got to go back and make sure we hit Richmond and Terre Haute and some places not quite as New Albany and Jeffersonville and Vincennes, and like we've got to hit those places. And so I think, and one of the recommendations, so I didn't mention this and I apologize, but of course one of the outputs is being able to capture all of the information that comes from the listening sessions in a report with some recommendations about how best to move forward. And I can tell you, without even having had the listening sessions right now, that one of the recommendations, at least as I've already given it verbally to Lewis now, is that this doesn't stop with these initial three, that this continues and not, and is an ongoing indefinite effort by, by the commission. And of course, this would have to be baked into the strategic plan and something that has been charged by, the new director. But we think it would be in the best interest of not just the commission, but, our state community, our statewide community as well, that these types of listening sessions continue to happen. But Ruth Ann, you're spot on. We wrestle with that back and forth. It's like, well, do we have a Zoom room with 70 people in it? And how productive is that going to be with 70 people and trying to make sure that we got all that input? So yeah, half a dozen in one, but that is a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up, but just know that is something that we didn't skate over, that we did consider that. And our suggested remedy for it is to continuously have these, and for the places that we don't visit in phase 1, that we look to get to phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 and on. So.
Thank you, Jamal.
Yeah, that's great. I had a very similar kind of reaction to Ruth Ann, and also kind of expanding on this idea of how we convene people and continuing. Obviously, I think there are a lot of ways in which we can use this model around the state, but it also reinforces for me one of the functions or ways in which the Arts Commission can work, which is as a convener. And a convener across geographic communities as well as cultural communities. It's probably, that's the different constituents that you described being in these meetings is going to do that. But I also think, for somebody in Jeffersonville to hear more about, the arts in Gary and vice versa, is going to be a really, really powerful thing. It's probably a second phase of this, but I think this idea of really continue to do these sessions, getting, you know, really pretty good at developing the model for doing them is going to serve us really well as we go forward in the years to come.
Yep. No, I think you hit one of the nails on the head. And keeping in mind that, look, although the communities themselves will represent, you know, a wide range of diversity, and some of the issues that get brought up will be unique to those communities. At the same time, many of those communities are seeing and facing some of the same impediments. They're seeing some of the same issues that others are seeing. And so to be able to articulate that and have and hear how other communities are dealing with some of those similar issues, I think is invaluable. And you're absolutely right. The commission being able to play the role of convener in that space, I think provides an added value to, you know, to our statewide communities in a way that hasn't been done before. And not just be able to highlight or bring up the issues or impediments, but there's probably some solutions and best practices out there as well that have come out of these. And so how do we take something that's being productively administered in Evansville, for example, and apply that to Gary, you know, but you know, many of these folks will have never heard of whatever that best practice is, if not for the commission convening these folks in a listening session. So, Lori, you're spot on with that. I think that is an added value that takes, honestly, nothing but time and effort, and arguably something that we should have been doing some time ago.
I'd like to just echo that thought. Using this tool, using Zoom, it's very easy to take a large number of people and randomly generate some smaller breakout groups. And those conversations between people that maybe haven't met could be incredibly valuable. And statewide community, which I think is another community we'd like to be able to talk more directly about.
Yeah, to Ruth Ann's point a minute ago, we've talked about at some point maybe adding this as by way of some sort of conference or that we can put together. A lot more work, but I think worth the time to consider doing that for sure.
And piggyback on Ruth Ann and Lori about the convener, also the idea of balancing, which is you have, well, you brought up way back when, Jamal, which is our antagonists, not just people who do not know about the commissions, but people who are actually opposed to it. We know who they are. They're the ones we don't want to waste money on us and so on. So clearly, as a convener, that is a huge role. And then on top of that, society biases. And I believe it was Ruth Ann who talked about, oh no, actually you, Jamal, who brought about all the different fields. For example, as we talked about the police and the, and one of the, when I was doing my advocacy work, community organization, one group I came upon, and I don't know if they're still active, is it's the Players Association of NFL. These are retired football players who believe in the arts, who are actually artists, and they formed this Players Association to promote the arts among young people and to promote the arts among themselves, to balance the, to put arts on a level with sports. And so that's a really good group for, number one, I mean, kids will go. I hate to say it, sports appeal to people. And the other one is that, and this is going to be difficult, is to work with something like a police band. Again, we use the police department quite a bit because on the good side is a lot of them have started youth organizations. I know he left, Darryl Boykins, he was the South Bend police commissioner, police chief, and he ran the tennis club for young people. And when he worked with us, we had a National Endowment Group on education. He came and he really helped us grow the word by working with these young people who, number one, were these are African-American children who are, hate to say, break the boundaries of playing tennis. And so Darren knew exactly how to help us. So again, it's going back to, I think, Ruth Ann, the surprising support from surprising spots, on top of which is the police. And Darryl was actually kicked out by Mayor Pete because Darrell did not want to do unprincipled things.
Okay, I won't touch on that one, Libby, but I will say.
I can say that in secret.
No, that's good. You hit some really good points. So again, we have some law enforcement folks scheduled to be in on the call. 2 former police officers, as well as one guy who was a former police chief. I think he was a chief. I know he was a fireman, but I think he was a chief as well. But my point is, I think you're spot on. Those folks see and get it. And the irony is, my guess is once we have some of these discussions, much of what they do, they may not consider it the arts. So getting them to kind of frame or see that line of thinking that it's engaged. I know one of the gentlemen who was the retired police officer runs he runs like a studio, a music studio. It's kind of mom and popish, but his goal, it was a group of kids that kept getting in trouble, and he noticed that their common theme was music, and they wanted to articulate themselves through either poetry or hip hop or rap, and they so he kind of bought this rundown building and put together this little hodgepodge studio, and the kids, instead of being on the street, were consistently in the studio and doing their recording. They can hear themselves and so on and so forth. I know, having personal conversations with him, the fact that was an art form never crossed his mind. Like that wasn't a part of his, he could care less how you framed it, right? His goal was to get, find a way to create some productive space and places for the kids to give their outlet. But the point, and I think one of the outcomes of convening them this way in these listening sessions, is to be able to get them to think of it through the lens of how this is kind of grounded in the arts, and then from there begin to tap into the resources that exist in this space, including the Arts Commission, but not limited to. There's tons of other opportunities. I think once you put that lens on, you begin to think of the other opportunities that exist out there for what you're trying to accomplish. So, Libby, I think you're spot on, and I'm hoping what we are creating here begins to pull a lot of that stuff out.
We call them the art secret agents.
Well, thank you, Jamal, for framing that up. I think that also the big point of all of this is that this is a journey, not as much of a destination as it is a continual journey, and we're going to build on information, we're going to build on policy, we're going to build on action, and it is a building process towards a point out there on the horizon, which we probably theoretically will never reach, but it's a process of always going there. And I'm really thankful to have Jamal and Karen and some really good workers and advisors and people that have both the connections and the passion to help us do this correctly. So Jamal, thank you so much.
Absolutely, guys. I appreciate the time and look forward to it, and I look forward to working with you guys on this. It should be awesome.
Thank you, Jamal. We look forward to it as well. It's going to be very dynamic, I think, going forward. So we appreciate your leadership on that. At this point in time, I think we will go ahead and move on to the Executive Committee and Executive Director reports, beginning with the agency financials and Maya.
Before we go on,
Jamal.
Hold on just a second. Before we go on, I just wanted to say, Jamal, if you need to leave, feel free to do that. But if you'd like to stay, that would be great as well. And I also want to just underline that the governor is in the process of identifying and hiring a chief equity, diversity, and opportunity officer for the state of Indiana. And so, I hope that all of this work is going to be framed and supported by the governor's office as well. And I think that's a great, synergy of things coming together in a positive way. The work that we're doing in the state, as well as the imperative that the governor has now articulated for the state as well. So I just wanted to do that before we went on. Maya, you're on.
Yeah, so on to probably the least interesting part of today's meeting, which is to talk about the finances. So that's not so much fun. So you have August in your packet. You'll see very much on target. Again, because a lot of us are working remotely and we're not traveling, and our expenses are very much on target from where we have budgeted. Again, remember, we're operating under a 15% reserve holdback. So what you see there is reflective of that. Two things I would point out at the bottom of the August year to date are two fund balances. One is for the Hoffman Trust, which is at the Brown County Community Foundation, what the balance of that fund is. And that, if you may remember, came to us through the dogged determination of Nancy Stewart in creating some avenues for financial support from the Hoffman Trust. And it goes to support, it went to support the Governor's Arts Awards when it was in Fort Wayne, but then also is earmarked to support PACE and its ongoing work. So we've not drawn on that fund for a couple of years now, but it is there to be utilized again for PACE. And then the second is Central Indiana Community Foundation balance $57,120. We could tell you the long story of how that fund came to be, but we don't have time for that now. But rest assured, it is there. We have not drawn on that in many, many years. So those two funds are there. And we wanted to make sure going forward that we included those in our financial statement. So anyway, happy to answer any other questions about August. Again, it was a quiet month. We gave out a lot of grant funds. So thank you, Chapin and Deanna and Paige, for all your work there. But that was the primarily financial activity for August. So any questions? Okay, then I'm going to barrel on to the thrilling conclusion of FY20. You've got the year-end FY20 finals as of July 2nd. You'll see that even with the additional 1% holdback, the state budget asked us to assume toward the end of the calendar year or fiscal year, we only ended the year with a $2,000 2331 deficit, which I'd say on balance, that's a victory. There's some areas that we were slightly over and we were able to make adjustments for in FY21. So anyway, happy to answer any questions. Doesn't look substantially different than the preliminary year-end that you saw at the June Commission meeting, but I'm happy to answer any questions on that thrilling financial report.
Maya, before we go, we do have an action item to accept the August.
Yes, yep, sorry, don't want to lose that. So, yeah.
Nancy Stewart, I so move. We accept it.
Second.
Okay, Stephanie, please do a roll call.
Thank you, Alberta.
For fiscal year.
Kathy Anderson? Yes. Alberta Barker?
Yes.
Libby Chu?
Yes.
Ruth Ann Cowling?
Yes.
Dave Heist?
Yes.
Greg Hall?
Yes.
Lori McRobbie?
Yes.
Jake Oakman?
Yes.
Sherry Stark?
Yes.
Nancy Stewart?
Yes.
Ann Valentine?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you, Stephanie. And now we over to Maya and Lewis.
Well, we're already talking about FY 2022 and 23 budgets, which would be the next biennium. And so the governor is in the process of crafting his initial budget, and we have gotten directives from the state budget agency that they're asking for a 15% reduction in appropriation for all agencies. So based on our current appropriation, they are looking at 15% less of that than that as a starting point. Of course, right now we are operating under a 15% holdback, but we have our appropriation that money is held back from in a reserve. But this would start our appropriation at 15% less starting FY22 and continuing into 23. And in accompanying with that, they are asking for no new programs and consolidation, if possible, of current programs. In what we have articulated to date, we are already operating, as you know, under pausing certain programs. And so we've already sort of kind of consolidated our programmatic side of things. So we're not including in our information to them any further reduction of programs or consolidation of programs, because we've already made that move in this particular year. Again, we'll have to decide whether we want those same moves for 22, 23, but it is a step that we have already taken in meeting the current 15% reserve holdback. So those are the basic parameters, and also all the other directives, the hiring freeze, travel, et cetera, those are all continuing kind of until further notice. So they inform that this process for the FY22-23 budget as well. So that's where we are at the moment. Maya, you want to add anything to that?
All I would add is I do appreciate how State Budget Agency and this administration has been flexible in allowing us to determine what that holdback looks like, as opposed to saying it needs to be in, for example, say personnel versus, everything else. They've been very flexible and to this point in allowing agencies to make that determination themselves. And we've certainly been appreciative of that. And again, the information we're getting from state budget is very timely. They've been very responsive. And although it's a difficult situation for everyone, we have appreciated the clear and candid information and timely information we've gotten from them. So that's as difficult as it's been. We do feel like we're getting great guidance and support from them to the extent possible in the circumstances.
Any questions about that you all might have? We had to turn that over to them on September 1st, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it's next week, we have a meeting with the director of SBA to talk through our submission. So
yeah. Let me just say, I'm sorry, one more thing, and that is senior staff have already come together and had several conversations, some very preliminary conversations about what a 15% holdback going forward is going to look like. We know what it looks like this year, but there are some expenses that we don't have in this year's budget that will be hitting us in FY22. And so we are already beginning to have preliminary conversations about what FY22, assuming that holdback or that 15% holdback doesn't have an additional holdback put on it, because there is a possibility of that, of sort of what various scenarios might look like. So we hope that we can begin to give you some indication, perhaps in December's meeting, how we think the landscape is going to look in FY22 and 23.
So again, just to be clear, because sometimes we use these words interchangeably, the FY22-23 budget would start with a reduction in our appropriation by 15%, on top of which a holdback could still occur, which is a management technique for the state to manage its reserve, basically. So what the governor and the state budget agency has asked us to do is to basically to present a budget based on a 15% reduction in our appropriation. So that's not something that could be reversed, like holdback can be reversed. It would be a new appropriation level for us, on top of which a holdback would likely occur as well, because I've never lived a year of these 14 some odd years as director where we did not have a reserve holdback imposed upon the agency. It's traditionally been more on the order of 2 or 3%, but as you know, this year it's 15% is the holdback piece of it. So just want to make sure that you realize that the 15% that we're talking about here is a reduction in the appropriation level that the governor would start his budget with for all agencies, not just for our agency.
Thank you, Louis, for that clarification. Are there any questions?
Louis,
If not, well,
Louis, is there ever any mechanism where we could, sort of, as things begin to move back in a more positive direction, forecast a return of that level of appropriations, or I don't know, just some level of commitment from the state that funding will return when the capacity comes back?
That's a great question. And again, we don't, and we'll talk, we've got Terry Whit-Bailey and Sally Gaskell with us a little bit later here talking about advocacy in the state. We are not in a position to advocate for our own budget. So, and certainly if history holds up, obviously we went through both a permanent, we went through an appropriation reduction when the 2008, 2009 recession hit. And then we were able, then our budget did come back, and actually came back stronger than it had ever been after that point in time. But that is territory for citizens to weigh in on. We're here to manage whatever money that is given to us in the best way to serve the needs of our citizens. We're not in a position to ask for more money. We can certainly indicate what the ramifications of more money might be in terms of services, or less money might be in terms of services for citizens. So we'll talk a little bit, or we'll have Terry and Sally talk a little bit about that in a few minutes here.
Thank you.
Good question. Hi, Alberti, would you like us to just continue here with the of commitments from our governor towards the arts? You all are aware of this really great decision that was made by the Office of the Governor to put $10 million of the unrestricted CARES money that the state receives into the cultural sector. And we have been working with the Office of the Lieutenant Governor. Indiana Destination Development Corporation is actually the one that's going to be issuing the checks from this, but we put together the application and the guidelines and the process, et cetera, for the program with them. And it is for arts, culture, and destination marketing organization support. So it covers arts organizations, other kinds of organizations that provide or produce arts opportunities and cultural opportunities, as well as destination marketing organizations, of which there's one in every of the 92 counties. The deadline has passed for these submissions. This is CARES money, so it supports expenses that are incurred between March 1st, 2020 and December 30th of this year in the areas of personnel and contracted personnel and operational expenses for COVID impacted organizations. We have received about 526, I think, completed applications for this. once we have sorted through all of those to verify that they do indeed qualify according to the program, and I think we've excluded about 26 of those or 28 of those. So it's just under 500 organizations that look to be eligible, and we will be meeting with the Lieutenant Governor's team in short order to figure out the formula we're going to use to how to appropriate the monies equitably, fairly, and consistently across all these applicants. So been a really terrific thing, and it's going to touch a lot of communities in our state. As you might well think, there are very small things that happen in communities that are arts and culture related that were impacted by COVID-19. And also kind of arts and culture was expanded. We expanded our footprint a little to include history things, arboretums, zoos, festivals of all kinds that are kind of culturally based, even though they might not be arts festivals. So that's all broader than the palette that we usually paint with as a commission. But I think that's also really great. In this whole process, we're discovering maybe a lot of people that we should know that we don't know very well, and some communities that we don't know that we think we should know. So it's a real lesson for us as well. And the Lieutenant Governor's office and the Governor's office has just been really, really terrific to work with. So we're really excited about it. We do need to have a memorandum of understanding with the Lieutenant Governor's office, just to who's responsible for what. As you can imagine, it's a little complicated with two agencies working on it. And that is an action item that you should be able to bring up in your packet. It should follow. And these are the points of the memorandum. The memorandum has not yet been executed, but it probably won't get executed until after we do everything, which is kind of funny, but so be it. At least we'll have one. Questions about the program or relationship with the Indiana Destination Development Corporation, which is a unit of the Lieutenant Governor's office.
Sorry, Louis, just I guess a technical question. When you say it hasn't been executed, is there a legislative action or action by the governor that has to be taken here?
No, it's just both agencies signing off
okay
on the document. And actually, I was surprised that they felt they needed one, because we're not exchanging any money. So the payments for all these things are coming through the Lieutenant Governor's office. They've received the money from the state budget agency. Usually you don't have a memorandum of understanding, except for situations where money is flowing between two agencies in some way. But for whatever reason, they really wanted to have a memorandum, which is fine. So we're crafting one. So it should be pretty straightforward from that standpoint, because there isn't any exchange of funds going on.
Thank you, Louis. Is there any other feedback before we vote? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the partnership memorandum of understanding with the Lieutenant Governor's office.
Dave Heiss, so moved.
Jerry Stark, second.
And Stephanie, if you could do a roll call.
Yes, thanks, Alberta. Kathy?
Yes.
Alberta?
Yes.
Libby?
Yes.
Ruth Ann?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Louis, I would just like to express my thanks, on behalf of the commission to the Lieutenant Governor's office. This $10 million is certainly worthy and appreciated, particularly at this point in time. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you for the commissioner appointment update.
Also, Alberta, I want to give a big shout out to Paige and Deanna, who have carried the water on developing the application of the program and the process. So they deserve a lot of the credit for what is going to happen here in a few weeks with all of these resources going out in a fair and equitable way in our state. Guys, you've been just spectacular. Thank you so much. So, and really it's been a full staff effort. We've all been involved in reviewing the applications and diving our noses into it, as well as the Lieutenant Governor's office, as well as stringers from DNR and other places to help us sort through a lot of applications in a very short amount of time. So anyhow, great job, Paige and Deanna. Thank you. Commissioner appointment update. I have been informed that we will shortly have 3 new commissioners replacing, although I don't want to use the word replace because these people are irreplaceable, Kathy and Nancy and Sherry. So by probably even next week, there should be a press release about the appointment of new commissioners. So I believe this to be the last commission meeting for 3 of our spectacular long-term leaders who have been a rock of wisdom and workhorses for the commission. So guys, we've got a little thing at the end just to thank you here, but I just want to say in this context with the announcement of new commissioners, things will never be the same. So anyhow, that should be coming shortly, Alberta.
Okay, thank you, Lois. Personnel, is Maya going to be doing that?
Yeah, Maya, you want to?
Sure. As a result of essentially state government largely working remotely since the middle of March, state personnel has asked each agency to come up with a remote work policy that not only obviously encompasses the current moment we're in, but then becomes sort of a remote work policy going forward. So we're in the process of working on that now. It will need to be approved by state personnel and will again become our policy of record related to remote work. So we are in the process of putting that together right now. There is a fair amount of tracking that will need to be a part of that and so forth, but we'll be building in those processes as an agency to ensure that that it's successful for us. Again, I think we've been an agency that's moved, I would say, almost seamlessly into remote work and have been very successful at it. I think some state agencies, maybe it's been a little more difficult, but we have done it quite well, I think, because we're so collaborative in nature. And so anyway, you will be seeing something at the December meeting to take a look at and approve, recognizing again that state personnel will probably have their eyes on it before you have your eyes on it because they are requesting it in to them by October 1, but we are in the process of developing it and if after seeing it, you'd like to make some revisions, I'm sure we can send those revisions back to state personnel for their consideration. So happy to answer any questions there about it.
Thank you, Maya.
Sure.
Will you also be covering the advocacy?
I'll introduce that. Alberta, we have our 2 coaches, advocacy coaches with us today. Sally Gaskell from Bloomington, Indiana, Sally has just retired from being a faculty member at Indiana University. And then Terry Whit-Bailey from Muncie, Indiana. Probably those of you who know Terry, she has been an executive director of a couple of cultural institutions in the state of Indiana, including the Madam Walker Center and a longtime community development director for the city of Muncie. Both of them know the public space very well. Sally has also served as our representative to Americans for the Arts, the national advocacy organization, as our state captain. So she wears a badge, I think, somewhere for that. And anyhow, I want to turn it over to them to talk a little bit about what's going on with advocacy in our state. Terry and Sally.
All right. Thank you, Louis. I think I'm supposed to start, and you have given me 5 minutes. So again, thank you so much for your time. And I do want to say a special hello to Nancy and Kathy and Sherry. It's good to see you again. And I always enjoyed working with you, and hope that you will continue to stay connected through the Indiana Arts Commission. I like to call myself an action figure for the arts, and have just been really excited to have this opportunity, and also to work with Sally Gaskell, who I consider a mentor and a friend, and gave me an opportunity to serve at the state level as an advocacy captain, actually during the recession. So that was in 2008 and 2009, and those were hard times, but we got through them, and we were able to speak up for the arts for the state of Indiana. Our goal now is to kind of bring a resurgence to that. And Louis is actually the person that reached out to both Sally and I to see if there was a way that we could just kind of help bring more, a greater focus again to the advocacy efforts and to the legislative part of what we do here in the state of Indiana. And I've got some notes that I just want to make sure that I'm connecting everything and all of the pieces. And he wanted us to start to talk more about this advocacy and the efforts and the visibility that we need to continue to have at the state level. We do it on our own, but it's better to just have a group of people throughout the state. And so he created this bipartisan couple. We're the co-conspirators, Sally and I. And we found a chairperson in the name of Ron Grooms, Senator Ron Grooms, who is serving as a chair of what we're calling the Legislative Arts Advocacy Council. He and Senator Tim Lannon are working together to try to make sure that we have visibility and that we have a voice on the floor. So our goals, we have several goals, and one is to promote a legislative agenda where we can share federal research, education, and policy developments on arts and culture. We can also use legislators as an asset to get the information and the word out, so we have that direct connection to them. Provide a better quality of life for Indiana, which also has to do with economic development, and allow others outside of the arts world to get involved, which is what I think you were talking about earlier in your discussion. And then maintaining unity within the organization. The Arts Commission needs to have an advocacy group to advocate for dollars and resources, and that's what Sally and I are working to do. So we identified through Senators Grooms and Lannon a group of legislators to help us with this effort. We had a meeting, believe it or not, on March the 9th, right before the end of the session and right as COVID was shutting everything down. But there were a few people that agreed to meet with us. And so Grooms was there, Senator Lannon was there, Senator John Ford was there, and Senator Eric Cook. And so we started to talk about how we would move things forward with them of course, as things were shutting down. And so we had to have some additional discussions. And we wanted to identify the legislators and then also have community people that are within their districts to connect with them, so that not only Sally and I are talking to the individuals, but the people within their districts are giving them consistent information so that they can take it back to the committees that they're on, especially Ways and Means, to help us with the support and the finances that we need for the arts. So the Arts Commission was very helpful, and I have to give a shout out to Bridget for her help in creating documents that were specific to each congressional district. Or legislative district. So that was extremely helpful, along with information about the economic impact that happened at the state level. Now we have a list of folks, and I want to just read them off because you may know some of these individuals. At the Senate level, we have legislator, I already talked about Senator Ron Grooms, and his person that he's connected to is none other than Commissioner Ruth Ann Cowling. Thank you. Senator Lannon will be, I will be connected with him. Senator John Ford from Terre Haute will be connected with Mary Kramer, who is the executive director of the Wabash Arts Spaces, doing great work there. Senator Eric Cook, Sally will be his community citizen person. Senator Eddie Melton, I will connect with Senator Eddie Melton of Gary. Senator Karen Talion will be connected to Donna Catalano. She's a very familiar name with the Indiana Arts Commission, who has transitioned to the Legacy Foundation in her region. And then our at-large person will be none other than Commissioner David Heiss. Thank you again for agreeing to help. On the House side, we have Terry Gooden from Austin, New Albany area, and Alan Platt, who is an attorney with Samtec, is the citizen person. David Hine in Fort Wayne. Nancy, thank you for agreeing to be the community and the citizen person, in addition to Susan Mendenhall with Arts United. Sheila Klinker from West Lafayette will be connected to a citizen, Todd Wetzel, who is the vice provost at Purdue, and he's also the artistic director of the Krannert Center and has just won a pretty big award for his work there. Wendy McNamara from Evansville is connected to the citizen Scott Wiley, who is the director of the Vanderburg Community Foundation. And then Cherish Pryor from Indianapolis will be connected to India Cruz Griffin, who is an artist, I believe in Richmond. And I should point out that this piece of art that's right here from the 2009 Governor's Arts Award was actually created by India Cruz Griffin. So we had that first meeting on March the 9th with the legislators. Then we needed to meet with the citizens, but we're all shut down. And so we had to utilize the virtual meeting space. So we had a Zoom meeting on June the 11th, and Senators Grooms and Lannon connected with us also. And it was very, very helpful to start to talk about some of the things that we wanted to do. So we're at that place where we've met with the citizens, we've met with the legislators, things are shut down, the folks haven't gone back to their meetings yet. And so we're trying to figure out how to put that next piece together. And so we're going to be meeting in the coming months with the groups together to try to push out this agenda. Sally's going to talk a little bit about what we're doing kind of at the national level and how we're talking to the folks in Indiana. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Sally.
Thank you, Terry. Wonderful overview. So needless to say, COVID changed everything for federal arts lobbyists. And our main messages to our 9 members of Congress and our 2 Indiana United States senators have been to thank them for their bipartisan support of the CARES Act in March. As Terry, as you were talking and rolling off the names of both Republican and Democratic legislative officials for the state of Indiana, my thoughts go back to how successful arts advocacy and lobbying always stem from bipartisan legislative support, always. So that's critical both on the state level and on the federal level. So Terry and I have begun meeting with our federal legislators. I've met with Trey Hollingsworth from the 9th District. He's my own, along with 3 constituents virtually. I've met with staff from Representative Susan Brooks, who is retiring, but has still been supportive of the arts over the years. And we wanted to thank her. I've communicated via email with Representative Carson's staff. He always gets an A or A+ from the Americans for the Arts report card. And Terry's planning on setting up meetings, or is in the middle of setting up meetings with Senator Todd Young, Representative Pence, and Representative Baird. Generally speaking, we have the National Arts Advocacy Summit meetings in March. Those were, of course, canceled this year. They went online for the advocacy resource development piece in May. And then many of us in the States have been rolling out these virtual meetings, which interestingly, you can get more people there from the district when you're not having to meet face-to-face in Washington, D.C. So far, so good. Now, the current news, hot off the press as of yesterday, is that it looks like there will not be any more pro-COVID relief support at the federal level prior to the election in November. And that's a real shame for us arts advocates. The Senate GOP did introduce a bill yesterday that failed. It was called the skinny bill. And I think basically the Democrats felt it did not go far enough. So in their partisan fashion, it was not voted in. It needed 60 votes and it only had 51. The other issue on the federal level is that, as you may know, the federal fiscal year starts on October 1, oddly. There's no budget, not a surprise in an election year, but it does look extremely likely that there will be a clean CR or a clean continuing resolution for the federal budget. So that's good news. We don't think that that will be an issue going into funding in October. So I wanted to give a shout out to one of our members of Congress, Jim Banks, our member from the 3rd District, got some national pro-arts attention this summer because he was one of 2 national sponsors of a new section promoting creative arts therapies in the national defense budget. This is the first time ever that arts, culture, or creative therapies of any kind have been included in the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, and it was passed by the House. So pretty cool. Nancy Stewart, I should have reached out to you immediately. I did not, so I hope that you'll talk to Jim Banks in his office and thank him for that pro-arts piece of legislation, which we assume will go forward once the federal budget is passed. I think that's about all I have time for. I just wanted to say that as part of the importance of the CARES Act is that it funded both not-for-profit organizations as small businesses throughout the state of Indiana, and it also funded freelancers such as artists and gave them incredibly important unemployment benefits. So there's probably no more PPP funding, personnel protection funding for these small businesses because the new legislation has not gone through. So that's too bad. But by and by, it's been pretty good news from the federal scene. Now, Terry, I think we want to touch on the upcoming Indiana Arts Homecoming sessions on advocacy. And then, of course, take any questions that you might have. And we've probably already used up our 10 minutes of time. We have put together with the staff 3 pro-advocacy sessions at the Arts Homecoming. We hope you'll all be able to join us. Terry's going to be interviewing Randy Cohen, a longtime research director at Americans for the Arts, on data to use for effective arts advocacy and lobbying, both at the state and local levels. I'm going to be facilitating a National Endowment for the Arts town hall with a senior advisor to the chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts, who's going to be talking about all of the ways that Hoosier arts organizations and artists can take advantage of federal arts funding. And then finally, our team of Ron Grooms and Tim Lannon, Terry and I will be talking about the exciting work that we've begun with our group of 24. So that's
Thank
our
you.
report. Any questions?
Thanks, Sally. And Terry, very much for your work and how this is moving forward in our state. Any questions from our commissioners? I do want to move our meeting along. We are at about 11:15 here. We were trying to let you go by 11. I don't know if we'll meet that bar, but let's give it a shot here. So thank you too very much.
Thank you, Louis. Agenda is cultural trust activity for Bridget.
Hi, thanks. So we are just about ready to give the Arts Trust projects their close up, and we're super excited about it. There are 57 counties this year that are receiving arts project support. So there are 57 Arts Trust projects. Just a reminder, that is a tactic we're using to make the license plate more relatable to citizens and to people who purchase it, giving them that personal connection. Jasmine and I have been hard at work communicating with all 57 of these projects, and we are working on a press release, some promo materials, and the goal is to get that out next week. That's still the goal, but with anything that we communicate out about the license plate, we have to get BMV's approval. So I will be sending that later this afternoon, and still hope to, they're pretty quick, so I still hope to get that back by next week. But anyway, per usual, I will send you guys a 24-hour notice that that will be going out before it does. Happy to answer any questions about the Arts Trust projects or what we're doing with the license plate.
Thank you, Bridget. Moving on to the Executive Leadership Transition Guiding Group. We recently had a meeting with Karen Gall Mills, and I say we, that being the search committee, consisting of Alan, myself, Kathy, and Nancy. As a result of that meeting, we are in the process of reevaluating the job description that is in the works of being edited. Once we have that, then we will be receiving some input from the IAC staff, those who work closely with Louis with regard to that. Louis will be announcing in October his retirement, and he will be doing that at the Indiana Arts Homecoming. And at that point in time, I know it's so sad to even think about that. Can't imagine the commission without him. But then there will be more information, to follow after that. We'll be sending out notices to individuals in the state, with some key organizations so that they are aware. And we're hoping there will be an opportunity to perhaps nominate some from the field and maybe have some sort of a public online forum. But anyway, that information will be forthcoming. Kathy or Nancy, do you have any other input on that or comments?
All I want to say is that the hiring a new executive director has impacted the way everyone is thinking about the strategic plan and taking it up to a higher level. And I think that was a brilliant move. That's all.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think that was a result of our meeting with Karen Gall Mills. So thank you.
And you can look forward to probably more of a timeline at the December meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay, then we will be, unless there's any other.
I think it's important, while we are a nucleus of people right now, that we are actually going to broaden the search committee when we really get into the searching part. We're just doing the due diligence before that. And right now we are looking at a group of people, and those are representatives from all over the state.
Correct. Thank you. Anything else? We will be moving on then to the regional partner update from Larry.
Actually, Alberta, Larry had to leave to go to another meeting, so he's not able to provide the report.
Okay, thank you, Paige. Committee on the Future and Programs, Grants and Services Committee. Paige? Yeah.
Thank you, Alberta. Yeah, I will just share what Larry had shared with me. And he said he had a great report. Of course he did. But he said that the partners wanted to share the IAC, give a shout out to the IAC for being so responsive and flexible. So this is a particularly intense time of year for programs because we have the FY20 closing with their final grant reports and the starting with contracts with FY21. And of course, we've taken all the contracts in this year for arts organization support and arts project support. So shout out to Chapin for slogging through, 300 and well, almost 400 contracts. So we've had the opportunity as a result for the partnership to really reach out to our grantees and get an understanding of if they're ready to receive some of these funds, if the organization is still operating. It's very good news that very few organizations have closed as a result of what's happening, and those that have already had significant challenges to begin with. We do see project grantees delaying their projects further again. Some have dropped out and because they just don't have the bandwidth or ability to follow through with their project. But there aren't as many of those at this time, although we have several that have asked us to delay their payments. And we know this because we've been speaking with them and talking with them so much through both IAC staff and all of our partners. So it's been a great opportunity to really build relationships with our grantees throughout the state. And in terms of the impact on them on a data sort of level, obviously 100% of course, certainly of our arts organizations were impacted in that they had to cancel an event or something. And the financial loss was around 45 million. And the participation loss was around 1.8 million overall. But we are seeing wonderful resiliency out there, which is really exciting. So it's great to see that the arts are continuing to leverage their creativity in how to get through this, and in some cases, even better than they were before. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you, Paige. It looks like we have Maya up next for the Cultural Trust activity update.
Yeah, and you have the Cultural Trust statement in your packet, and all I will say is the trust continues to grow. We did draw 40,000 out this year, in this fiscal year, to support the Arts Trust Plate projects, as Bridget talked about previously. And again, we hope that this Arts Trust Plate project, the highlighting of those projects, will help bring more recognition to the plate and drive plate sales. So that's all I'll say. Thanks.
Anything else on the Indiana Arts Homecoming, Maya?
Just that we will be putting out a call for registration here in the next week or so. Right now, I believe we have about 16 sessions, several creative opportunities that will be happening in virtual space. And Sally and Terry already mentioned the two keynotes, one from Americans for the Arts and the other from the National Endowment for the Arts. It will look like a very different conference this year, obviously, since we're not coming together, but we think it will have a lot of rich content. And because obviously it will be free, we anticipate a lot of participation. So anyway, you'll be seeing more in your inboxes about that pretty soon.
Thank you, Maya. Paige, PACE research update.
Yeah, so PACE is our Partnering Arts Communities in Education program, which is both a research program and also a grant program. It's a 3-year partnership between a local organization and a school to provide an artist residency where the teaching artist teaches both literacy and arts. This has been going on since 2015, and the research with this report is specific to 2015 to 2019 on the 7 completed partnerships that we've had thus far. We're about midway through. Our researcher is Dr. Bob Sable from Purdue University, whose research work is known throughout the world, quite frankly. And the great news is that he continues to see strong positive results. The students are gaining knowledge, skills, and understanding in the arts and literacy, but most importantly, they're retaining it over 3 years. And I think particularly valuable is that the student engagement in school has increased an average of 15% for those PACE students. And we know that that's extremely important to maintain that focus and deepen their learning and understanding and commitment to education. So we will continue to have this program go on. It will sunset in 2023. And certainly the program has been impacted by COVID for this upcoming academic year. But we know that what we learn through that process will only continue to deepen and enrich our understanding. It's a very successful program, and we had some additional funds that were not utilized at the end of last year by the Arts Council of Indianapolis, and they have created a video about arts education and its power and its strength, and that will be unveiled during Arts Education Week, which is next week. And Stephanie Haynes has been working with ComStaff, and they have a lot of exciting things that they're working on that will come to light at that time. So that's about it for the PACE report. Does anybody have any questions?
If not, thank you, Paige. A lot of wonderful work on there. Communications update, Bridget.
Sure. So looks like first thing on the list is the biennial report development. And there's not a whole lot to report there other than we just recently rounded the corner on our on-year National Endowment for the Arts application. It's really been a full team effort there on all fronts, but Lewis definitely carried us in terms of the narrative. And with that, he of course, has written a great narrative for our agency and what we've accomplished in the last couple of years and where we're going. So that kind of flows into what the biennial report is about, right? Celebrating our accomplishments and looking ahead. And so as far as the narrative portion of the biennial report, we're going to pull from that NEA application. Luckily, too, communication staff has been firing on all cylinders, creating content of our own with our grant recipients. So we have plenty of stories to wind in to support that narrative, and we're excited about it. The webinar series that we've been working on since March has reached over 35,000 people on Facebook, which is really exciting. We've also found that 40% of the engagement on our Facebook page comes from those capacity building webinars and smaller videos as well that we produce ourselves, while those posts only account for 11% of the posts that we actually make. So what that tells us is that people want to hear from us, they are enjoying the content that we're creating, and it's encouraging us to create more. It's a lot of work, but we're excited about it. It kind of feels like an all year round homecoming, if I'm being honest, just taking that and keeping it going. But the field is responding to it. And if that's what the field needs, that's what we will provide. So we have a few more webinars coming up. Like Paige had mentioned, Arts and Education Week is next week, and Stephanie Haynes is all things wonderful and is working on a webinar next week with Indiana Philanthropy Alliance, where she will tout the PACE report and encourage community foundations to support arts and education and arts integration in their communities. Really looking forward to that. All of the webinar recordings can be found on our website. And if you have any trouble finding them, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to connect. And then the third item, it looks like that I have to talk about, is another short one, announcement of the 2020 Governor's Arts Award recipients. So the plan is to announce those recipients at this year's homecoming. It will probably be kind of a smaller thing than obviously it otherwise would have been. We hope to be back in person next year for the full kit and caboodle, but happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, Bridget. Did you have any comments on that first item for the Development of Arts Trust APS grantee campaign?
I did not. No, I already talked about that earlier, so we don't need to spend any more time on that unless someone has questions.
Okay. Okay, hearing no questions, we'll move on to old business. Does anyone have any old business to bring up? If not, we'll move on to new business. Does anyone have any new business to bring up? Well, and we have on the screen my Sherry, Kathy, and Nancy. What can we say about the strong leadership that we've had from all three of these outstanding commissioners? You know, Sherry for guiding us through the strategic planning, our last strategic plan that was developed through her leadership on the Committee on the Future, and Nancy and Kathy with their work as our past presidents. We certainly thank you for your strong examples of leadership. And I know all of you have also been strong advocates for the art, and that is certainly important, is ongoing advocacy for the arts. And mostly though, thank you for your friendship for the arts, and we certainly hope that you stay involved and know that you will, because that really is the type of individual that you all are. So Louis, I think with that, I'll turn it over to you for your comments. Louis?
Of course, I'm talking with my mute button on, so
Okay.
Which is something that I don't normally do, by the way. These three people can attest to that. It's hard to mute me, but anyhow, you know, these three people are very special to me on so many different levels. First of all, you know, you have, as I get close to the end of my career here, you have so few people that you really think are mentors for you in your life. And all three of these people represent that in my life. All three of them were my bosses. Of course, Nancy and Kathy, that's easy to understand because they were chairs of the commission. But when I was the director of the Columbus Area Arts Council, and Sherry, she was the community community development director for the city of Columbus, and I ran one of the city assets, and at the end of the day, Sherry was kind of my boss in many ways in that situation. But all three of these people have taught me so much about leadership and tenacity and professionalism and how to do things correctly. All three of them have such incredible integrity as people and as leaders, ethics in the way that they operate, and also just sort of the love and the care that they do things with as well. Can't think of any more better examples for me in my life of public servants and public stewardship, and the kind of leader I wanted to be. So I'm going to miss you guys a lot. So, I think I'm also responsible for all three of them being kind of commissioners, Kathy and Sherry directly, because I went to the governor's office and I said, these two people would be great. And then of course, I didn't know Nancy, but Jeannie Miro knew Nancy. And I said, Jeannie, okay, who's the next person from Fort Wayne? She said, oh, it's Nancy Stewart.
You have to let me tell
Jeannie
that.
said that, oh, Nancy will be better than I was. And Nancy certainly, as far as this commission, all three of these people, it's really hard to look at our history and find people that were more impactful. So thanks so much for your friendship, your guidance, and all the work that you've done. So
I have to tell
we're going to make sure that you're not strangers.
I have to tell the little story on Lewis or the commission, because I found out I was appointed to the commission because it was in the newspaper and people started calling me. So at that point, I called our representative at Arts United and I said, what is this all about? But I will have to say, I know you asked us to speak last time and I had a hard time, but it has been a joy and a privilege to work with all of you. And Lewis, you have taught us so much. We have certainly been thankful to have had you as our boss, so to speak. And may each one of you continue to enjoy it, certainly as much as we have.
And just for me, it's been an amazing life experience to be able to work with this whole team. Thank you all. You're just amazing. Thank you.
And I would say that the future has never looked brighter for the commission than it does right now with the current commissioners and the incoming ones, I'm sure too. And Lewis, a salute to you for your leadership through the years, and savor these last months. You're leaving quite a stamp on the arts in Indiana.
Indeed.
The best is yet to come.
Thanks. We are eternally grateful for everything that you have done. And certainly it was a blessing that each of you served on behalf of the commission. So you have our gratitude. Anything else before we make a motion to adjourn? If not, may we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion, Jake.
Second.
Stephanie, roll call.
If it's okay with everyone, I'll just assume that everyone is in agreement unless someone says they're not.
I like that. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Great meeting. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.